ممنون هستم. جلسه امروز ما با آقای دکتر فرناند دو وارن هستش، گزارشگر ویژه حقوق اقلیت‌های ملی، مذهبی، زبانی و قومی. امروز قرار بود در حضور ایشون خانم آسمه جهانگیر هم در این جلسه حضور داشته باشند. متاسفانه به علت فوت ناگهانی ایشون نیستن اینجا. ما به خانواده آنها تسلیت میگوییم و همینطور چند لحظه سکوت اعلام میکنیم به این منظور. ممنون هستم. جلسه امروز ما اشاره میکنم که آقای دکتر دو وارن مأموریت ایشان در سازمان ملل بررسی، نظارت، مشاوره و گزارش وضعیت اقلیت‌ها از جمله در مجمع عمومی سازمان ملل متحد می باشد و یکی از اهداف ایشان تلاش برای اجرای اعلامیه حقوق افراد متعلق به اقلیت‌های ملی، مذهبی و زبانی و قومی در همه کشورهای عضو سازمان ملل می باشد. اشاره می کنم که ایشان بیش از 200 نشریه به 20 زبان در رابطه با اهمیت آموزش به زبان مادری و همچنین آموزش به زبان و مولتی لنگویستیک نوشتن. به علت کمبود وقت من امروز اینجا نمیتوانم به جوایز و کارهای بیشتر آقای دکتر بپردازم و از ایشان خواهش میکنم که صحبت خودشون رو شروع کنن. Je vous en prie, docteur. La parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup. I would like to thank the All Human Rights for All in Iran organization and Sudvind for the invitation to address this side event on issues surrounding the rights of linguistic minorities. But first, allow me to express my regrets, my sorrow, and my apologies. It should have been my colleague Asma Jahangir here with you this afternoon instead, but as you heard, her recent passing away has meant that we have lost the voice, the drive, and the dedication of someone who has been throughout her life an exceptional advocate and defender of human rights and the rights of those who are too often among the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. At the same time, I want to apologize. I want to apologize because my own comments and observations today will tend to be rather general. They will be general because I will focus in terms of the international law and the rights of linguistic minorities, particularly in the area of education, without being able to refer directly to the situation in Iran. I do not have the experience, I do not have the knowledge or background to be able to share with you the good or the bad, in fact, in Iran. So my presentation to you will have to be a more general one in terms of what we can expect or what is possible in relation to the linguistic rights of minorities. So let me start with a statement which is very simple, but will continue throughout my presentation. Minority rights, or the linguistic rights of minorities, are human rights. And this is something that is perhaps not always well understood. One of the priorities of my mandate as Special Rapporteur on minority issues is to work with other stakeholders and interested parties to point out the activities within the United Nations and in the special procedure mechanisms as Rapporteur to point out the minority dimensions and challenges that are present and how they can be addressed by using and applying consistently a human rights approach in minority issues, as you can find in the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Minorities. Now, before I do that, before I tackle directly the issue of the linguistic rights of minorities, let me just show you one example, very quickly, of how one of the world's great challenges is at the same time a minority issue, deeply and directly connected to human rights obligations. And this is, we have to go back. No, the other direction, here. Okay, thank you. The vast majority, more than 75% of the stateless people in the world, those who have no citizenship, belong to minorities. And those are quite often, in fact, most of them, are the result of a discriminatory denial of equality, of discrimination in relation to gaining, obtaining, or keeping citizenship. It's not an accident. The reality is that most stateless people in the world are the result of man-made rules and policies that target or impact most directly minorities. It's not an accident, it's not natural, it is something that is man-made. And at the very root of this statelessness of minorities are in fact the violation quite often, not always, but quite often, of human rights, of a policy or legislation which discriminates specifically against minorities. And I use this example to emphasize that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Minorities is a human rights document. And please, if we go to the next slide. Thank you. It's a human rights document, and it contains, well, important principles as to the obligations of states to take measures to protect the identity of minorities, as you can see here behind me with Article 1 of the Declaration. It also mentions the rights of minorities has to be applied without discrimination, and it refers to the language of education, though in Article 3 you have behind me, it's quite general. My presentation to you, when I talk about the language rights of minorities, will be focusing more on education, because the language of education is actually quite an important one for many minorities around the world, especially when we're talking about linguistic minorities. And perhaps also in relation to Iran. This is an issue, a question which is referred to, which is important for some minorities, and where perhaps certain steps ought to be taken so that governments can better comply with their human rights obligations. What I just said is quite general. Let me add a little bit of nuance to what I just said. In the use of the Declaration, first of all, it's not a treaty. This is not a legally binding document. So in a way, one has to be careful, because some governments will say, well, this is all very nice, but we don't have a legal obligation. It's only a declaration. It's not a treaty. It's not law as such. They're right. That's correct. However, when I said earlier, this is a human rights document, what it also means is the content of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Minorities very often enshrines or elaborates, adds on the principles, certain rights that are part of the human rights treaties in international law. So, for example, I would suggest to you that when we talk about discrimination in this document, when we talk about the rights of minorities, when we talk about education and language, what you have there are explanations of how other human rights treaties can work in relation to minorities. For example, the Covenant, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, is a fundamental human rights document. And some of the content in the Declaration in relation to minorities actually elaborates on the legal obligations of that treaty. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Well, racial discrimination in that treaty includes ethnic groups. And in terms of ethnic groups, we could also include linguistic minorities. And therefore, even racial discrimination is reflected in this document and may be raised when you have situations that might discriminate against linguistic minorities around the world. So, in a sense, even though this is not a legally binding document, it does represent the applications of human rights standards in relation to the specific situation of minorities. And so, we can say that a lot of its content is actually legally binding. And this can be useful in dealing with education or linguistic rights. But let me add another nuance. There are complications. And one of the complications is that most governments, and in fact even within the international community, we're not sure how to apply, or we're not sure what some of these provisions mean. The issue of education and language. If you read this closely, it's quite general. It doesn't say everyone has the right to education in their own language. It doesn't say that. It's actually much more general. It says that, well, everyone, wherever possible, persons belonging to minorities may have adequate opportunities to learn their mother tongue or to have instruction in their own language. So it's not very precise. Most experts are not sure what this means in practice. Does it mean that a government has an obligation to provide minority education or education in the minority language everywhere with no conditions? No. Clearly, that doesn't mean that. But what does it mean? Do you have the right to receive education in a minority language all the way and including university education? The answer is we don't really know. There's a high degree of uncertainty in relation to a number of these provisions that deal with language. But what I can tell you, and what I want to share with you in the next few minutes, is there's an increasing understanding and an evolution as to what might be involved in relation to the language rights of minorities. I don't have time to go into the detail. Next slide, please. And even among experts in the United Nations, we don't have complete agreement. There are some experts who are a little bit uncomfortable. They believe integration means that minorities maybe should learn their language a little bit, but they're not really comfortable with providing education in the minority language to a very high degree. However, I think what is important to notice is that there is an increasing acknowledgement, a recognition in terms of international decisions, opinions from different United Nations organizations and other institutions that there are linguistic rights. It's not too complex, that's sometimes an argument used. It can be recognized in areas such as education, and it is part of human rights. One of the first documents to recognize this is the guide that you have behind me. This is a practical guide prepared by my predecessor, Ms. Rita Itzhak, who was the special rapporteur until August of last year. This document was published in April. And it is the first time we actually have pretty clear indications as to what are the linguistic rights in international law. And this actually, once again, makes the connection between linguistic rights and human rights. So it is the first time really at the United Nations that we try to clarify more what are the linguistic rights of minorities. And it has a section on education that I would like to take to bring to your attention. By the way, the section on education was prepared by myself. I work on this document. The issue of education and the language of minorities is one of the thematic priorities. It's one of the priorities of my mandate for the future. We will be holding a series of activities and, in fact, important meetings on this specific issue. So there's a momentum, I think, in relation to what are the language rights of minorities, and particularly in education. Having said that, I have to also add, there's not complete agreement. I think there's strong arguments, but even within legal experts, you have to understand it's not unanimous. If I can go to the next slide, please. Before I continue, I just want to point out that education is one of my thematic priorities as Special Rapporteur. I also have 3 other areas of priorities for my mandate. I just want to mention them quickly because they might be relevant in different parts of the world, including Iran. One of the other priorities of my mandate is the issue of statelessness, those who have no citizenship. The other one is the increasing danger and threat of hate speech and intolerance against minorities. I think many of you know that in a number of countries, and I'm not going to name any specific example, but hate speech and incitement to violence against minorities is an increasing issue. It's an increasing problem. It is an increasing danger around the world. Minorities are particularly targeted, and it is one of the priorities of my mandate also. And a 4th priority for my mandate will be the issue of the prevention of conflicts. Once again, connecting ethnic conflicts, especially, to issue of the rights of minorities. In many parts of the world, and once again, I'm not going to name any specific country, but in many parts of the world, you have violent conflicts that begin because minorities feel they have nothing to lose, that their situation is desperate, that they are excluded, that they are victims of discrimination. And at one point, if you have no option, some elements may use violence. And this is in those kinds of situations, usually I think we can say that there are policies and activities of the government which makes the situation so desperate. And those policies and activities usually involve violation of the rights of minorities, discrimination, and similar steps of exclusion that lead to conflicts. So I just wanted to mention that these are areas of my priorities. Is there really a right to education in your own language? Or is there a linguistic right to education? And if there is, what are the limits? There's no easy answer. But let me just make a connection between the issue of education and the language of minorities. Next slide, please. More and more, once again, this is an evolution, I want to emphasize. But more and more, there are different bodies of the United Nations, different committees, who have been asked to look at the issue of education and the language of minorities. And what you're beginning to see is at least a good number of different United Nations committees interpreting treaty human rights obligations that have started to connect the issue of education in a minority language and a human right. Now, these are a list of different committees over the years when they've looked at the issue of the language in education. One is the Human Rights Committee. The second one that you have here, CRC, is the Committee on the Rights of the Child. The other is the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And finally, there's the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Now, once again, it's not unanimous. There are at times contradictions. But what you have on a solid number of occasions is all of these committees admitting that either through the right to education in the mother tongue, sometimes they will talk about that, sometimes they will talk about the right of education and culture, sometimes they'll just refer to discrimination, other times multilingual education or the right of a minority. But on a relatively high number of occasions, what they've done is admitted that there is sometimes, in the appropriate situations, a right to receive public education in your own language. And this is the important principle. It's not universal. It's not always clear. There are contradictions. But the connection between education And the language of a minority in public schools, this is not private, this is public schools, is recognized. And this is the evolution which will continue, and it is important to point out. This is solid in terms of human rights. It still needs to be clarified. There are difficulties, there are complexities, but it is connected to human rights. It's not just another principle that is not, has no foundation in terms of human rights. And this is something that can be used by minorities around the world. This is the kind of argument that we understand at the United Nations. It's not just about survival. I mean, if you look at what is contained here, the human rights we're talking about is not just simply a theoretical concept of survival. It's a specific, it's a concrete human rights. Let me show you something else. The next slide, please. Not only is it a human right, but it's a valid reason, and there are very concrete benefits for minorities being educated in their own language. This is from what you have behind me is from a study done in South Africa, where they measured how children succeeded in school. The line in the lower line, which is I think brown behind me, is when you have students essentially taught in the official language, but not their language. Okay. The average. The blue line on top is when you have children taught in their own language. Basically, we're talking about minority children. What this means, and this is a good study, I think quite clear, when minority children are taught in their own language in public schools, they succeed much better than if they are taught in a language which is not their own language. It seems logical, but you need to show this scientifically. You have to show that there is a value in respecting the rights, the human rights of minorities, and it has concrete benefits. On the other side, if you don't teach minority children in their own language, you are creating a situation of disadvantage. You're actually penalizing children because you're teaching them in a language where they will not succeed as well. This is why there's a connection, which I think should be made very often, between discrimination in education and not using a minority language. To the next slide, please. These slides, if anyone is interested, can be shared with you, and I have other documents of the same. These are examples around the world that show that not only is education in a minority language a human right, or there's a human right issue involving the language, using the minority language in education, it shows the benefits of using a minority language and the disadvantages, the difficulties, the problems caused if you don't use a minority language in education to the appropriate degree. So this is from different parts of the world, including the United States. There is clear evidence that when you have Hispanics, children who speak Spanish, if you don't teach them in Spanish, especially in the earlier years of education, they don't do well in school. They fail school. They drop out of school. They never complete their education. Evidence is absolutely clear that this is an important human right that has serious consequences for children when their rights are not respected. So these are examples of disadvantages and negative consequences, and it means in terms of the rights of minorities and also others, that in some situations, not using the language of a minority in education when it is practical, when it's reasonable to do that, when it's possible to do it. Not to use the minority language is unreasonable, unjustified, and therefore discrimination in international law. I think this is one of the most important aspects that have to be retained here. And this might surprise some of you, even the United Nations Human Rights Committee on a couple of occasions has even recognized that university-level education in appropriate situations should be in a minority language. If you have a very, very large minority in a part of the country, let's say millions, millions of individuals who speak a minority language in a region of the country, there is no practical reason not to have university education in their own language. In fact, it could be discrimination not to have university education in their own language in those appropriate situations. I've almost finished. I think my time is almost done. But I just wanted to bring you these issues, that there are human rights considerations, and governments sometimes simply need to be told, to be shown. Not all governments are negative when we raise these issues. In fact, my experience has been that it can be quite open when you have a dialogue and there is proper discussion of these issues. I, as Special Rapporteur, will be trying to find ways to better protect the rights of minorities, including in the area of education, through working with interested parties, including NGOs, civil society, and also government parties. And do we have time for some questions?
I think yes.
Yes? Very well. Thank you.
If you have, yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have some question. I am going to read in Persian because I write it in Persian. Okay? بله. ما یک سوال این است که ما در ایران با این مشکل مواجه هستیم که بسیاری از مردم حکومت فعلی را به خاطر اینکه اسلام از طریق اعراب به ایران آمده شعارهای عرب ستیزانه میدهند.
Sorry.
بعضی از شعارهایی که میگویند ما آریایی هستیم، عرب نمیپرستیم که در تظاهرات ماه پیش به کرات شنیده شد. نظر شما در این مورد چیست؟
I have to say that I cannot comment directly on the situation in Iran because, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, I have never dealt with the situation specifically of Iran. I don't know what the details are in that country. I have not had the opportunity yet of doing a country mission in Iran. So I cannot comment directly on the situation there.
Okay.
But I will. But I will just say, because I'm told that I have to leave in a few minutes. What is happening, or what may be happening in Iran, happens in many countries, as I pointed out. As part of my priorities for my mandate, I am looking at the issue of hate speech and incitement to violence against minorities. So there is a phenomenon which occurs in many parts of the world, specifically targeting at minorities. And I hope to be able to perhaps at one point visit Iran also to examine what is the situation there, and in order to see how that connects with my priority, but also with a problem which is worldwide currently. So as I said, I cannot specifically answer concerning the situation inside the country because I don't have the experience yet. And I think I have time for one more question.
Just I am going to give.
سلام جناب گزارشگر، هرچند میدونم یعنی تخصص شما نسبت به ایران و بخصوص اطلاعاتتون در مورد ایران متاسفانه خودتون گفتید، یعنی اون در اون حدی نیستش که به پرسش‌های ما پاسخ بدید. ولی حالا دوست داشتم اون پانلی توی که سالن‌های دیگه برگزار شد خیلی سخنرانان از جمله خانم آبادی در مورد تقریبا تفصیلا به حقوق اقلیت‌ها و نقص حقوق اقلیت‌ها در ایران اشاره کردن. میخوام اینو بگم، خانواده من و خود من و بخصوص برادرای من یکی از نمونه هایی است که میتونم مثلا به عنوان یک فعال حقوق بشر که اینجا حضور دارن در موردتون بیارم. این عکسو که میبینین یک فعال سیاسی اکتیون، پولیتیک اکتیون 24 سال است که در اعدام 2 ماه پیش در ایران به اعدام محکوم شده. یعنی میتونم بگم در ایران حقوق اقلیت اصلا هیچ پایمال میشه، یعنی در حد صفر هم نیستش. متاسفانه یعنی جواب خواسته های اقلیت ها در ایران همواره زندان، شکنجه و اعدام بوده که نمونه برادر من اینه. برادر من محکوم به اعدام شده به این دلیل که به عنوان یک فعال کرد خواسته بیان کنه. ایشون یکی از فعالان مدنی و فعالان سیاسی بودن که از سن نوجوانی با این خواستن در همون در چارچوب خود قوانین اساسی خواسته هاشون رو برآورده اعلام کنن یا به زبون بیارن که خودتون به حال امیدوارم یه روز راهتون به ایران باز بشه و بتونید در مورد ایران بیشتر مطالعه کنید، بخصوص در مورد اقلیت‌ها و نقص حقوق اقلیت‌ها در ایران. ولی فقط میخوام جهت یادآوریتون، من اینجا حضور دارم به عنوان عضو خانواده‌ای که از اقلیت‌های ایران هستیم، از نمونه‌ای که در طی 12 سال اخیر 2 اعدام در خانواده داشتیم، 1 کشته در خانواده داشتیم و بیش از 60 سال زندان در خانواده فقط به عنوان یک فعال خانواده کرد. واسه همین چیزی به اسم حقوق اقلیت در ایران وجود نداره. بحث فقط کردان نیستن، بلوچا، آذریا، عربا، سنیا، بهایا و حتی بخشی از خود شیعان که اقلیتن در مذهب شیعه. یعنی منظورم کلا اقلیت در ایران بی حقوق هستش. خوشحال میشیم به هر حال توی زمینه بیشتر مطالعه کنید و یا بتونید به هر حال مفید و فعالتر باشید. خیلی ممنون.
This is not question, just this information.
I would like to respond. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think the more information I can have in the exercise of my mandate, the more I will be able to understand, appreciate the situations, and perhaps address them also. I would invite you to go on the internet, the website page of the mandate, because there are possibilities of raising allegations of violations of the rights of minorities, and there is the possibility of urgent action involving my mandate addressing specific situations of the violations of the rights of minorities. And so the mandate of Special Rapporteur is a special procedure, and it allows the Special Rapporteur a degree of flexibility to approach a government concerning certain areas of minority issues. So I would invite you, and others also, to consider using the special procedure. Once again, because it is flexible, it permits me to act quickly in certain situations, especially if they are urgent. And you can do so through our webpage on the internet. So please, as I said, I cannot comment on any specific situation because I don't have the background experience yet, but there are ways that we can deal with some issues in relation to minorities. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Je suis désolé. Une petite question.
Une petite question.
Très petite. Bien.
من فقط میخواستم اینجا از این تریبون کمک بگیرم و این مسئله رو بگم که 4 نفر در آذربایجانی به خاطر روز زبان مادری 21 فوریه 2014 اینها فقط میخواستن در یک خانه جشن بگیرن که اینا را گرفتن و این در مجموع 45 سال به زندان محکوم شدن و 8 سال به تبعیض، هر کدوم 2 سال. یک نفر آقای اکبر آزاد به 10 سال و 2 سال تبعید، آقای علیرضا فرشی یکانلی به 15 سال زندان و 2 سال تبعید، آقای بهنام شیخی به 10 سال و به 2 سال تبعید و حمید منافی به 10 سال زندان و 2 سال تبعید محکوم شدند. پروسه اینها دوباره در آخر مارس یا اوایل آوریل تشکیل میشه که اینا برن زندان. اینها هیچ کاری به غیر از جشن زبان مادری نداشتن و اینها تا به حالت مبارزشون به حالت مدنی بوده و هیچ خلافی انجام ندادن. چرا باید این 45 سال زندان به این 4 نفر و 8 سال تبعیض داده بشه؟ ممنون هستم که گوش کردین. آقای دکتر از شما تشکر میکنم، خیلی ممنون تشریف آوردین. Je vous remercie beaucoup. Merci d'être là. Thank you very much for all the things, Doctor. Thank you.
Merci à vous. Merci à vous. And please send me the information on that.
I sent it to Anis.
OK, très bien.
And minority and...
Et merci à vous, mesdames et messieurs.
Merci.
Merci.